with an understanding of the context coming together with the building programmatic elements in it, one of the things that I like to do, especially with students, is begin to get an understanding, even at the pre-design phase, of what the structure is going to do. And to do that again, I'm going to turn back to Dynamo to give us something that is iterative and interesting and begins to teach this notion, especially at the academic level, that we have three different elements of design. We have the enclosure system, the structural system, and the spatial system. And the more I can get the students to see those three elements operating independently of each other, the more I can get them to be expressive with the design thinking really, really early on in the process. So let's take a look at how we can use a structural grid from Dynamo inside of Format. So again, with Dynamo in particular, sometimes it's about writing your own scripts, but for me, I'm finding that it's almost always more about finding scripts that are already done. And this one is by Josh Goldstein, who is an absolute freaking rock star with this stuff. And while it does something very simple, it is really flexible and dynamic to use. So we could go in and break down exactly how to put this together. That would definitely be a different video, and it would definitely take a lot more work on my part, as there are actual snippets of code written in. But by and large, the core of this and knowing how to leverage this script for your own design purposes really happens right here with base settings, column sizes, and what to display. So once I have this, so this is something I've downloaded from the Dynamo Format website, I can take this and I could plug that initial download directly into Format, but typically what I like to do is I like to kind of get in and tinker with it in Dynamo, understand how it's working, and then I'm going to send this to my own A360 website. So I'm going to go send to web. So this is column spacing and publish. If I go into Format, then I can go to my Dynamo window, refresh, and now I have column spacing. So bringing in the column spacing simply allows me to do something again. So this is a script that somebody else has published, and this one, unlike mine, is much more efficient to use directly inside of Format. So if I double click, that opens up all of my key variables from the Dynamo script. And an important thing to note, if I have something that I don't want to show up, if I have a numeric value, something like that, that I do not want to show up inside of Format, let's just say if we wanted extension of the grid lines, because I love the extension of the grid lines, I don't care to manipulate that inside of Format. I can simply right click on it and say, rather than is input checked, I can turn it off. Now that as a variable, if I save this to the web again, will not show up inside of Format. And that's how you can begin to come in and make sure some of these things I'm not seeing quite so many variables. But that said, let's look at how I would begin putting this into my building programming space as much about the actual structure itself, what's holding the building up, and working with structure as a form of design expression. So I know right away, if I'm going to put it into this main showroom area, that I'm a little bit too tall. So let's go to the column height and drop those down to 16 feet. And there's a small pause where it says, is there any other variables you want to input? And then it's going to process it. So that's sort of what you're seeing there. So I know I want I'd like this center row of columns. So I know I want my Y bay count, that's this direction, to drop down to 3. And I want its spacing to be more like 10 feet. So they're going to be sort of scrunched together, a little bit closer together and fit within this system. And I know I want my X bay size. I'm kind of happy with 20. And let's do an X bay count of 5. So that's going to increase the number of columns in the X direction. So I'm going to select outside of this so that I can move this group. so that it's starting to work inside of that volume. And I kind of like this idea of the overhangs. I like the idea of the center column, but the size of those columns is completely ridiculous. Way too massive for something that small, especially when I'm doing, more of a design showroom. I'd like those to be a little more background, slender, a little less like a bunch of trees on the inside. So let's double click those one more time. Oh, not the building programming one. Columns. There we go. And let's change their radius. Let's reduce them by a fourth, all the way down to, or reduce them by 3/4, all the way down to a 6-inch diameter. And now I'm seeing something that's much more interesting to me. These sort of slender columns inside of this space that can start to work. So while I have that, I'm not just limited to a single use of that script inside of Format. I can select that set of columns again, or actually let's not do it that way. Let's go back into Dynamo. If I were to copy this, I would have 2 instances of that column spacing script. And if I manipulate one, it's going to manipulate the other. If I go back into Dynamo again, or back into my Dynamo window and select column spacing again, these two are now independent of each other. So I can go back into my numeric values again and change my column height to 12 feet to fit inside of this back area. I believe. Yeah, that's 12 feet. Woohoo. I can do my bay size, my Y bay size down to 10. My Y bay count down to 3. And my X bay count back up to 5. And my column radius to 0.25. Looks good. So let's go ahead and slide that into place now as well. Looks like this one's a little bit narrower. So again, we'll double click to get to its values, and we'll change our Y bay spacing down to 8. And then same strategy. We'll move that over to slide that in. And so you can start to see how working with those are 2 independent, both coming from the same Dynamo script, and really quickly beginning to work through what a structural system could start to mean, at least on this lower level, as it works with the programmatic spaces.